time for BB403, Strategic Craft Beverage Marketing. This is week 4, where we're going to talk about brand and branding in and around the craft beer, spirits, distilleries, and the cider houses. So we've talked to Hopworks and Reverend Nat of His Hard Cider. And now we're going to talk to Jeff Saline. So why don't we, first off, let me have you kind of introduce yourself and set up kind of how you came to get so heavily entrenched and become a guru in brand.
Well, I've been drinking beer and doing brand work since I came out of college, since 1995. So storytelling, finding and helping corporations and brands, and in this case beers, find their core narrative is something that I'm very passionate about.
So when we talk about brand, this is something like that immediately gets turned around, right? Like brand pays off immediately, or is this, how is this, you know, I know because I've been in the room in those, with the brands, not to get confusing brand and branding, but where they think, okay, I'm going to go out and brand myself, and that, you know, this is something, tomorrow I'm going to see results, or next week we're going to have a lot more sales because we spent this money on branding. But what's the reality of that?
It can happen. It's like winning a lottery ticket. You know, it's a long-term investment. That's the reality.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that. You know, it's it requires it's like a real estate investment. Brand takes a long time to pay. So you have to build a relationship with your customers on a daily basis, weekly basis, yearly basis, evolve with them. The brands, you know, the companies that can invest in brand long term. But what we can do, you know, brand in the sense of your look and your feel and your iconography. Like mostly what I do is communications. There are people who are MBAs that find and understand, you know, what kind of beer should we create? Is this the right marketplace for this beer? Who should we be targeting? You know, these kind of questions. They hand that information to me. So I assume that it's verified. So often if we get something that has a budget to it, so we can do something amazing, you can find fast results. You can, and you do it with a really high engagement campaign. But high engagement means risk, so there's risk involved. I think about it in the same way you would invest in anything. Your culture at your organization is one that you like to take risks. You can do something amazing, high engaging, and in that case, sometimes it pays off. Everybody else, we have to a long-term investment because it's about connecting with people in a real way, in an authentic way.
So you and I have had conversations in and around this where we talk about things like, you know, a lot of times you can jump in and grab what, you know, I think you referred to it as low-hanging fruit. So can you kind of talk me through, maybe we should step back. Well, so tell me about the low-hanging fruit. Maybe we can then step back and talk through, like, a lot of these folks are thinking about starting something or building a brand from scratch. So maybe what we can do is talk about, you know, how you get those quick wins with the low-hanging fruit, and then take them through kind of an iteration of building one from the get.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit concept we covered a little bit in that video around rational drivers for the brand. Essentially, what it means, it's typically for brands that have been in existence for a while. There's a brew pub and it's been around, or you have a beer and it's established, but maybe you want to do a new label or something interesting with it. Or maybe you have a new product line, but the company itself has been around, the brew's been around for a long time. So in this case, we can always come in and look like rock stars immediately. And really anybody in marketing who knows what they're doing can come in and do it. It's just a matter of connecting with folks who end up trusting us. But if you look at the data and you understand what you're looking for in the data, you can always find what on the brand side we call rational drivers. So the rational drivers are the reasons why people will initially connect with your brand. It's around the product. You know, I want to drink a beer, so I go and have a beer. I try a new beer like I did today, and wow, it's quite good. I'd like to try this again. You know, that connection with the brand becomes established, but it's this rational driver that brought me there. And the things that connect to the rational drivers are typically the ones that people that aren't into marketing can speak to very quickly. So it's the better, faster, cheaper. They're buying my beer because it's the location is right if you're a pub, for instance. These kind of ideas. And the thing is that those things work. And usually, if we just start asking a lot of questions, we get things like, "Oh yeah, that postcard we did a couple of years ago worked great." It's always simple stuff. It's just finding what has worked in the past and redoing it. Or do most of the people come from one specific area? Or, it's just targeting and then focusing messages on those targets. But the other thing is that those quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, once they're picked, it's not as easy. And you need to invest in the emotional drivers, the brand.
So guys, feel free anytime to, excuse me, to hop in on the chat room and ask questions in and around brand. But
you can ask questions about anything, actually.
I know we just talked through a project you guys did where you just built the brand pretty much from scratch. But kind of take me through the process of trying to envision for the very first time. We're a new distiller or a new cider house, and we're trying to come up with our identity and our brand. Like, what does that process look like to start?
Well, anybody who's worked at a big ad agency or worked on brand for a long time knows the reality is that methodologies are generally something we sell. But what works is getting a bunch of creative people in a room together that have done this many times and brainstorming out concepts. We're looking for, but we don't do it based on funny creative ideas. We do it based on, as we like to say, look at more stuff and think about it deeper, which is from a small ad agency on the East Coast tagline. But this concept of all the information that is possibly available. So we would do a deep audit of all of their, if it's an existing brand or a new brand equals who you are, who you want to be, and how you are perceived. So in this case, we would, if it's brand new, it would be a lot of interviews with the principals and owners. Who are you trying to be? What is your vision? How does it stand out? And we're looking for unique selling propositions, USPs in the business world, or just how do you stand out in the marketplace? And even if it's something that lots of other people are doing, if nobody else is owning it, lots of people make really hoppy IPA, but if nobody is using that in the marketplace to say, we are the hoppy IPA beer, you can't own it in the marketplace, or you can try to.
You're the kangaroo beer. You tie that hop and get that idea of I'm a frog, or you own this, and this becomes part of your true brand identity to kind of know who it is, and it reaches into your culture as well as a company, correct? I mean, doesn't brand reflect the core tenets of who you are and what you want to be?
Yeah, who you are, who you want to be, and then how you are perceived, which is the more challenging arena, and really where agencies end up coming in. And how do people? So my first perception of your brand when I walk in, or a friend of mine came in with a growler like I did today. Hey, check out this new beer. This is great. You guys should try this. And you try it. When I went to the pub, I didn't look for this particular beer. I just went to get any growler of IPA. I knew I liked IPA. So the question becomes, when I go back to the pub, am I going to get that same beer? Will I look for it the next time? Can I build a relationship? And then not just through the taste of the beer, because I love it, but through the kind of bottle that it's in, through the way that the person who poured the beer talked to me about it, because they were well informed, because who they were buying the beer from informed them correctly, because they had the right stickers to put on stuff. You know, when I walked in, their signage was there. There was a lot of marketing behind when I walked in and looked at that beer. Saw it many times in the pub itself.
We had multiple touch points with the identity before you actually made it up to the tap handle to say, I think that one, and it's claw, when you talked about the claw. And
it just felt like an integrated feeling, like the pub wasn't just slinging their beer, they had like a relationship with this local brewery is how it felt. And they never said anything to me. That was interesting.
So having gone through this myself, but I kind of want to talk through it for the class. I apologize for the tinkling of my announcements if that's coming through on the mic. But
I was hoping it was asking questions. People were asking.
No, nobody's asked a question yet. But I've gotten a lot of email by questions. Sure.
All right, I'm going to come up with questions for you guys.
But so when you're doing this brand development process, there's this idea of a brand book, and having helped craft and create more on the media side, but seeing these what do we mean when we say brand book? Can you kind of take me through what someone should expect if they hire it out, or what someone should create if they're doing it themselves?
Well, it's interesting. So when we create brand books, I sell them based on two concepts generally. One is you don't have any. We're going to create a new brand for you. When we're done, how are you going to communicate all of the tools that we have developed? So you have to have a brand book. So one thing is, hey, we've developed your brand, let's have a brand book. The other is, the brand is in existence, and it's simply, we want to create some marketing things for you, but we can't because you have no idea. For small businesses, it's so challenging operationally to deliver on everything that they need. One or two people are tasked to do tons and tons of stuff. So a brand book, generally also captures everything. I like to think of it now more of a digital or interactive tool. It's not just a book that you print and look at, but where do I get the correct logos? If I have the fonts, what are the fonts and where are they? If you have labels or a new ad campaign, or let's say you have materials that you want to give a distributor of your beer, and they want to find a place online to download stuff, and they want to say, hey, I want to put your sign up, can I do that? Or hey, I'm going to have this little small brew event thing, can you guys sponsor it? Where do I download this stuff? How do I treat your logo properly? Or if you bring on board somebody, our friend Aaron here comes to do video, and it's if he's doing post-production, what does the video look like? How does the logo treated? And a lot of times the brand books are simply laid out in based on channel, based on the marketing group that needs to understand that channel. So in video, I need to know, what does a lower third look like? What's the call to action at the end? How does the logo move on? If it's in print, what is the look and feel? What are the colors and so forth?
So, colors, fonts, maybe a voice, if you're looking at snippets of writing, kind of the tone and tenor of what the brand sounds like.
Yeah, we have 2 or 3 brand books. I think we can just put them online somewhere and have you guys link to them.
Perfect. So we'll put this through. So this is excellent. We've got 3 questions now. So the first question is, how do you approach the brand that may be looking at changing their direction completely? Mm-hmm. So I've gone from a soft and fuzzy to a sharp and hard, or something to that effect.
Changing brand direction is a challenge if you're trying to find a change quickly. Right? It's a real estate investment. It takes so it's like it's more navigating the ship. You can't take a sharp turn if we're talking about brand. You can get messaging out there in PR and marketing. But it's kind of like saying, if you ever lived in a small town, hey, I know that you stole that candy bar when you were 6 years old. How are you going to get me to think differently of you? And that takes a long time. To get people to think differently of you can take a long time. But if what you mean is we want to take our current look and feel and what people think of us and evolve it, or we want to change their mind completely, it just requires, if you really want to change people's perception completely, so we want to change brand for a reason, right? So it depends on the reason. If the reason is because there's some big challenges, we have negative press, something like this, you have to prove it. So that's going to take a long time. If it's we want to connect in with a different audience because we have a new product or something like this, that's a much easier, because they don't understand who you are yet. So you just need to approach that audience with the right brand messaging. Generally, you have the money to on that message to, and then when they come to you, you can deliver on that message. So it's not just the message, but you can authentically deliver on whatever that message is. Work. You know, specifically for changing direction, my first question is, do you have full approval from everybody in the organization? Because a lot of times it will be politics involved, because who you are and who you want to be is like a core question. Who am I? That's challenging. In fact, John and I today went to a meeting where one of the managers of the brand said that very thing, that the whole session on brand several months ago ended in them headbutting, battling, arguing out loud.
There was screaming going on in the room, is I think what was an exact quote of what he was saying, because they got so passionate about this brand and you can't take it in certain directions and things like that. So I'd say for a big change of direction, just to add what Jeff said, is it's a lot of it too has to, how long has the brand been around? How pervasive is knowledge of the brand and those kind of things? So if it's, if it's a small local, you've been doing small batches associated with a pub in a small area, but now you're looking to grow and you want to kind of change that brand entirely. While in that small community, it may take a little while to change. Changing in a bigger section is probably easier, and it has to do with like consistency and owning the direction that you're turning into. But if you're somebody that's established and something that's been out there for a while, it's very slow to turn that ship to get a different perception from the audience in and around, and then you have to own whatever that is. So if I'm this big giant brand that's all about mass quantity, and I try to immediately shift to I'm very localized and I'm here for the local community, that's you got to go and prove that for year over year over year, and there's some big major brands out there in this industry that are you'll notice in the craft beer section there's a craft beer that is made by a big major that they don't even put the label of the major on it, because they want to, they're trying to create the brand perception of this craft nomenclature. So we've got a question in around crafty beer. Let me fill these real quick. Yeah. So I just wanted to answer. I like this question around living the brand in the brand book. Yeah, absolutely. The brand book should absolutely include your core narrative. What are you passionate about? What is it? What do you stand for? What does it mean? And living the brand, absolutely. Everybody who works for you, everybody you meet, all your family, your friends, and your fans should be able to live and help you, articulate that brand message. And the brand book should absolutely help guide that discussion. I want to add to that. So I completely agree. I think it's this, it's this ethos. It goes beyond, we really truly get this brand. It's almost a brand Bible to some extent, where these are the tenets of what we're going to live by. And yes, they come down to like there needs to be white space around our logo, or there needs to be specific things in and around graphical layout. But it also is, we were talking about this the other day, the sonic branding, things like that. What does our brand sound like? What is it, like? How are the lower thirds? How does it feel in these certain senses? The voice. I think living is a good term. Yeah, I think that my understanding for a lot of the folks in this class, I don't think that you need to care about a book
The book ends up being a thing that goes in the drawer and nobody uses. The important part is the brand piece. It's the stuff that's in the book. You need to understand it. You need to be able to articulate it. You need to know it. It needs to be top of mind. And you need to be able to make sure that all the touch points for customers through service, through operations, through your marketing, live and understand how to talk about the brand. I think internal is a great place to begin, especially for the first question around change of brand. So often, we go in and the marketing manager and the marketing director and the marketing VP all completely, talking about the brand in a completely different way. Like they don't understand it internally, so it's a great place to start.
I think one last thing on the brand book. I think as well, once you know it and you've talked through it, the book itself is helpful when you bring in a graphic designer who's going to help build the front end, the CSS skin for your website or something like that. And you can hand them this thing to say, like, here are the colors, and they've got all the, they know these technical specifications and design that they're going to need, and then they can get a sense of who you are. So that's where I've seen the most value in on these smaller scale projects for brand is like, here you go. I don't have to answer a bunch of questions to this person that I've just hired. Here's a book. You can go through it, and if they've been in the industry, they'll get it. They'll go, okay, cool, and they'll be able. It gets you further faster in a smaller setting. To not contradict you about the book, but the book can be very helpful in those instances.
Yeah, I just mean, so often for smaller businesses when we create these kind of documents, the strategy is only as good as your ability to execute on it operationally. You're running around doing 400 things. You just need, it's like the material in the book is vital. You have to know what your story is, what your message is, how you show that through iconography, through logo types, and these kind of things. But, really, ultimately, what brand is, this next question I really like, I wanted to segue into this idea of, I can't see the full name of the person that just said, like Andrew, maybe? Andrew, A-A-N-D-R?
Either Andrew or Andrea. It was probably Andrew. Andrew, I'm guessing.
Andrew. So, in terms like this idea of the brand around the brewery versus the name of the beer, and a lot of times in branding, people confuse the corporate branding, the organizational branding with product branding or service branding. So I think that's a great question. The brand for your organization is the customer's impressions of you, their feeling of you, the idea they get when they connect with you. Ultimately, what brand offers, what we're trying to do, as I mentioned in that video segment, is we're trying to drive customers or target audience towards a better vision of themselves by virtue of our brand. Literally, and that can be defined in a lot of different ways, but they need to see better version of themselves. And we want to drive them towards a kind of hope. These are around the emotional drivers of the brand. But this hope and this sense of fulfillment through the brand offering or through your brand promise can come through in a lot of ways. It can be through, I want to feel like I'm more popular. Right? We see that a lot in alcohol branding. Or I want to feel like, I'm the center of the party. There's a lot of these kind of hopes and fears that we see all the time in this kind of branding. And it's important that when we get into product branding, that there might be specifics. One of the examples we use a lot, it moves away from beer a little bit, but are automobiles, because it's so ingrained in us from childhood. We all think of like cars, we know where we are financially based on the car we drive. Think about that. That was branding that drove that, and just truth and economics. But the idea of attaching value to those segments, that is branding.
But how can Lexus put a price point up here when you have another manufacturer that puts it down here? And
or when Toyota
creating a
uses the
perception of value.
same engine, for yeah.
Say that again.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is that the point of bringing up automobiles is that for the family sedan, I need to talk about safety. But I don't want to talk about safety for the coupe. That's the 12-cylinder coupe. That's all about performance exactly. So your product branding can be specific to a target audience, and it's completely appropriate. And it needs to sustain the voice of your larger brand. And it needs to live inside what I like to think of as a voice box. So when I'm angry at my wife, I swear. When I'm angry at my daughter, I patiently, try to give her advice or something. But it's always me, but it's I have different audiences that I'm speaking to, so we would target different. It's a great question, I think, and it's one that we're constantly thinking about and talking about and trying to learn more about.
I feel like the brand is potentially that shelf differentiator. It's something when you're, in a row with all your other competitors, that product brand is this idea of, I want to differentiate. So I may have a fun and whimsical. That may be my, like corporate brand kind of umbrella. But when I see it on the thing, it's my beer is the Three Stooges, and I see Mo getting poked in the eyes, or whatever that is. It still plays to the master brand, but it's this differentiator with me on the shelf with a bunch of other things. Does that feel right in your application?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a part of the brand. It's an extension of the brand. We have to, part of branding is engagement. Right? We have to engage with people. And there's no better example of engagement than the label. It's a brand created for a commoditized market. Walking by in the aisle, and it's beer after beer after beer. Why am I going to buy beer? It's a great question, actually. Why do people buy anything? Probably only a few reasons. Right? Connected to it in some way, like my family works, or they tried it and they have an affinity for it, or somebody told them to try, right? Or there's some kind of social proof, maybe. A bunch of people are talking about it, similar to somebody told me to try. It's interesting to break these ideas down and really think about them. A lot of times in marketing, we don't have time. That's really what branding tries to do, is just slow everything down. We have to slow down to speed up. So it's not just, can I engage the people as they walk by? Yes, you can. Simple. Put a bright pink package on the beer. You'll engage everybody as they walk. But the question is, as soon as that occurs, have your attention for a second. I've done my job, but I have to do it in a way that pays off on who we are. Otherwise, it becomes a challenge for your target audience to make believe, and they'll feel like you're not being authentic, and they'll never come back.
So you hit on a point that is probably why this is what draws me into things like this. Mm-hmm. So you say put a pink label on it, and that is a really good point where you can do something like that. But if and there might be an immediate effect, but if you look at it from a brand standpoint, then you need to start thinking about, well, what does the color pink evoke in my different target audiences? And how is that perceived? And what are they going to, and what's the color of pink? Does it remind me of Pepto-Bismol? And it's crazy to me, like how deep down this rabbit hole you can go with brand. And it really all kind of comes back to like the psychology of buying and humans and their perceptions and the things that you get shackled with, really, as somebody who's trying to sell somebody something, because of all of these things that preceded you and thinking about those things. And how do you overcome those hurdles of saying, well, we've been patterned as society to think from the moment that we're born, pretty much, that that, well, pink is for girls and blue is for boys, and so that's how is that going to affect your brand? So this is what, like what gets me all jazzed up is this, like, how does that, the kind of psychological effect work its way through the kind of brand experience?
Mm-hmm. John knows I love to chat about evolutionary psychology and behavioral science as connected to brand. And that's just it. We know why people do the things that they do. Right? Behavioral scientists have shown it, and it's an evolutionary psychologist have theorized on it. Psychology is more theories, but it's been, why it works is not as relevant to the point that it does. We make buying decisions based on our emotional impact that it has on us. This is what. So if we can unlock that mystery, what can connect you to this emotional impact? Now, and this is what brand offers. It offers this connection. So if we're only saying buy our beer because it's cheaper, it's going to be somebody come along who's cheaper. But if we can make this emotional connection to why you should enjoy beer, it has to come from actual enjoyment, and the brand reinforces that enjoyment. So there's a lot of, all the way up to the Harvard Business Review level discussion around, chicken and egg, which came first, around, does the brand help you connect? And there's a lot of theories on this that I like around different stages of a brand or different levels of a brand. So the idea, Jim Signorelli's book, Brand Storytelling, talks about this. This idea of at a level 4, you already know about the brand because everybody does. It's like saturated, the Coca-Colas and the Apples and these kind of brands. The physics of brand connection are going to change based on the size of the organization that you're in. To think about and talk about, because what you can always do though is find a way to classic guerrilla marketing style. In other words, like you can find a way to put a flag in the ground and say this is what we stand for, and this is where we're going to drive our customer base. Generally, location, especially for small breweries and stuff, smaller beers, is a great way to drive that flag. You're not going to compete with Anheuser-Busch. You don't need to. It doesn't matter. We have our location. We're from Portland. This is where we make beer, and we have our customers. Location provides a great way to do this, and that becomes an integral part of the brand.
I have not, and I'm not sure, Jeff, but I haven't seen the latest AB InBev buyout today, so I'm not sure what you're. I haven't. Have you? No. Do you have any brands that we can point to that really have that storytelling, emotional connection? Have they built that connection and how they use it? So in the beer industry, I would say one of the ones to me that has done it really, really well, and I'm not sure how far afield, how they've gotten as far as distribution goes, but Ninkasi, which is a brewer here out of Eugene. And honestly, actually going back to the other week, the Hopworks, they do a brilliant job of creating their seasonals in and around stories that are specific to the Northwest. So I don't remember, I hope you guys remember the story he told us about Aaron, do you remember the island, the San Juan Islands war, a pig war, in and around this whole event that happened back in the day, and how they grow their hops there, and the story is online, and then it moves on, and then they've got the story on the bottle itself. So I would say, Hopworks and Ninkasi, I know those are both fairly local examples, but I think they do a really great job of this kind of like storytelling and what it is.
That Tire comes to mind. They have a great story around their beer. how they came up with the name Fat Tire and the bicycle on the front. I think there's a lot of these stories for how the brewery got started, how the beer got started.
What about Beyond Beer?
Well, storytelling, I mean, it gets pretty easy beyond beer. There's 1,000 examples.
I mean, you're.
Did you watch the Super Bowl? I mean, I would say 80% of the commercials were based on storytelling and connecting emotionally and trying to draw you into a broader discussion if you go online and look at their brands.
I mean, Coca-Cola is probably the most, and it's easy to point to Coke because they spend $1 billion+ a year, and that's an old number actually, just on ads and marketing and stuff like that. But they really have made a massive commitment. I'll put this in the YouTube video. There's a Coke 2020, which is their vision of storytelling in an association with Coke, and how they basically have proven, and in fact we were just talking about this the other day, they have proven that using storytelling, and specifically this kind of idea of transmedia methodologies to tell stories, so telling a distinct version of that story where you leverage the platform that it's told on, they saw with the Happiness Factory and some of the other components that they've done, they saw like a 0.74% increase in sales directly correlated to storytelling, which for Coke is amazing. If you think about how many Cokes get sold every single day, if you can imagine a 7% jump, I mean, the amount of profits they made from that 7% could probably feed a third world country for a couple of years. I mean, that kind of a jump for Coke is massive. So if Coca-Cola, while they do have a lot of energy and resources and money to put at it, but they've proved the model and show that it works. So I would say, it's definitely something that, it's what I do every day. This is, I spend my days digging deep into the kind of story narratives for brands, and you and I won't be other own stuff in and around this.
Yeah, the thing with storytelling is that a story is a conflict. That's what makes story. And what we're looking for is resolution, conflict to resolution. And brand works on the same concept of driving people away from fear and towards hope. And so if you're looking at your core story, what is your story and how do you use it? And what does that really like when you use this? The question is what's the conflict that you're resolving for the marketplace or for your customer because of your beer? And if you look at the video / keynote deck, I guess they don't have the keynote, but they will.
You'll have it, a PDF of the presentation, but you have the video version that we've already put up.
Yeah, we speak to this idea. Storytelling, I think what's more important than this idea that you have to write this story is just coming down to core narrative or a core word. If you can get it down to a word, that's amazing. This is what we stand for. The word would have to be unpacked and understood. But like, we stand for this, and if you can get there, then craft a story around that as your core theme, and then with that, there should be conflicts that are immediately evident based on an example that comes to mind immediately that we had recorded and talked about before was around a gym that we had done some work with around this word fun. And, that's their core word is fun, but what does it mean? Is it like in relation to the people you train with in the gym, or is it in relation to the exercise itself? Both were true. We interviewed every single person that went to the gym. We interviewed extensively, and we discovered that both things were true almost equally. And so we went to the marketplace and looked, and we discovered everybody advertised your relation to the exercise, a hardcore workout. So we went with your relationship with having fun with your friends. And like, there was still hardcore workout. Every image had more than one person. And they were all like having a great time working out. And it worked wonderfully for them. Their results skyrocketed. And it was very simple. We just looked at what was there already. They already had a successful gym. There were already, lots of people to interview and talk to. They just didn't know exactly what to like take and capture and say, this is our core thing. And it has to be, ideally, to be successful, it needs to be a combination of who you are, who you want to be, and how you're perceived. This, but based on what the market needs, and being unique in the marketplace with that need. Then you have a phenomenal opportunity in brand.
Yeah, I think the reality of where people, you kind of have a tendency in brand, I think, as you evolve a brand beyond this initial creation, there's a lot of tendency for people to kind of flourish and spend a lot of time and energy on brand, and then it just kind of sits. And, to some extent, this is where a lot of people can this is where a lot of people make hay, is that you identify these kind of stale brands. And I think stale brands, to some extent, are the folks that just, I think a lot of people see brand as these exercises, or they bring somebody in, like a Sandstrom, or, you bring in some big agency to kind of go through them, and they come to this brand moment, and they know their colors and their fonts, and they, we have figured out brand. Mm-hmm. And then they just kind of stop. And I think that's the, this idea of, how do brands evolve, and what does that look like? And one of the things, and this is definitely not required reading for this class by any means, but one of my favorites of the last 10 years was from Kevin Roberts of, I believe it's Roberts, the CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi wrote a book called Love Marks. And the whole premise of the book is like this evolution of brand. And so, can we talk a little bit about, like, what does it look like, once you kind of identify some core tenets, you've got a brand book and you've got these kind of elements, what does that, like, progression, over time look like with brand? And when we say brand is a long-term investment, and really it is, you're looking at like 7-10 years out to kind of get to, with any sizable brand, reaching the plans of a brand. Can we talk to those kind of, this kind of evolution and extension of brand?
I think the brand evolution, there's different theories on this. There's lots of ways to think about it. Very simply, from most business owners' perspective, if something's not working and you're not growing fast enough or in the right direction, maybe we can look at brand tenets and brand work, change that. So a lot of times that initiates a need for a brand evolution. If things are working, a lot of times smaller businesses don't want to invest in brand development. But big companies that can know that understanding how your audience evolves every year, just like styles evolve and tastes evolve, things will change. So what we end up with, based on maybe some different beers we brew, for instance, like the first beer that is the hardcore, we love this beer, it's amazing, we have these like core people that love our double hop hardcore IPA, but we end up selling so much more light beer in the summertime to all of the ladies that come. And so it's like, we only have this small group that really buys this stuff, and it's double hardcore hop IPA. Do we still make it? So do we, and if we stop making it, does that evolve and change our brand? Yeah, because we're changing the audience. And does this, if we're growing, we can say, no, our organization or our group has, our brewery has this brand and this is just a product. Or it could be that product, we saw with Basecamp today, becomes the brand itself.
And I don't know, I definitely want to talk to this reference. So there's a software solution called Basecamp which they have basically consolidated. They had a CRM, customer relationship management tool. They had a to-do list. They had a bunch of stuff. But their core product is this kind of like collaborative working environment called Basecamp. And they sent out this message to all their customers saying, hey, when we go places, you know, we say, we're from 37 Signals, everybody was like, who? Unless they're in like these technical circles. But when they say, oh, we're with Basecamp, they're like, oh, yeah, Basecamp. My church uses Basecamp, and my this, you know, like this idea. And so they have realized that the evolution of their brand, 37 Signals, from a corporate level, has basically evolved. Their product has become their core brand, and they are actually cutting away, because of business decisions, these other elements, these other products that they sell or create, and they're just going to focus on this one Basecamp, and that is now their brand name, and they're rebranding themselves as that. So I think that
like Lucky Lab is just Superdog now.
Right.
Just call it Superdog. That's all we are. It's the only beer that sells on
So thank you for putting the link in to Love Marks, Kevin Roberts. Thank you. So the premise that Kevin puts forth in his book is that there is this capacity to evolve beyond just brands. So it's beyond just the Morton salt for choosing salt. That you create this emotional connection. You create this love of this brand. And when I teach in my other class, so I talk about this as well. I always say, you know, I use the example of like, you know, I'm in a restaurant and the waitress comes over and she says, what would you like to drink? And I say, I'll have a Diet Coke. She says, we have Pepsi. And then I say, I'll have a beer. Or, you know, I'll have an iced tea or something. I don't choose a product that is fairly comparable. If you ask most people, you know, what's the difference between a Coke and a Pepsi? There's not a lot of difference. But I've created this connection, this affinity to a brand in Coke, Diet Coke, that if I can't have that, I don't want that type of product. Luckily, I don't have that problem with beer. That's why I didn't use beer as the example, because I will definitely take another flavor of beer. But it's this idea of evolving beyond this kind of, you know, branding, Morton Salt perception of because I know it, because my mom got it. So what does that take as far as a commitment, do you think, to get to those kind of points with that?
It requires a number of things in terms of what you can study and prove, you know. It requires reinforcement, basically, different directions. But as soon as your decision to purchase this product is reinforced by friends and family and whoever says, wow, great decision, that tastes great, thank you. Wow, you brought that product again, thank you so much for, you know, bringing that to my party, that was perfect. That reinforcement delivers the connection. That reinforcement in a bigger discussion for companies like Anheuser-Busch is a different kind, you know, it's a different discussion, but as you can reinforce, you know, the technology of advertising, it works is that it works. So, you know, often what we're looking for is not, can I sell you my beer, can I drive you to my website 9 times, because 92% of the people that deliver, you know, that come to my website 9 times buy. So I can't get you to buy, but I can get you to come to my website 9 times. How do I do it? I have a message, I have a story, and I deliver content on that story, that brand. It sense to people.
Yeah, another, just to wrap the Love Marks, another really great example of a Love Mark is like an Apple is a great product that's kind of evolved for a lot of people beyond. There's this fanboy ethos and around, you know, Apple, gotta be Apple, nothing else.
I mean, when you get to a place like, I like the example of Harley. People that I know that have Harleys, you know, for fun now, I just say, you know, I'm like, some random
Yamaha.
Yeah, like anything else, just to like start an argument. And what's interesting is, you know, in this case with Hartley, at least the guys I talk to, they don't even think about it I've been sucked into this brand. No, it's this, how dare you even say that? It's like an
lifestyle.
Yeah, it's this funny kind of, the affinity and the connection becomes, why though? It's because it becomes so reinforced through, as, like the tribe, like that concept that is around. The tribe, Seth Godin's book, the tribe delivers your acknowledgement. You are acknowledged. You are a hero for connecting to this product.
And I think a lot of
I wanted to mention one other thing that's interesting about the evolution of brand is, we might have put this in the video, I don't recall, but the toy industry has this example that they're in business 10 years, but they're not. They're in business for 1 year, 10 years in a row. Every year in the toy industry, you have to find new products. You have to do it in Q1, and by Q2, you better be in, you better be manufacturing already. By Q3, you have to be hitting the sale racks for Christmas time. And every year, you try to get it right, And there's very few brands in the toy industry that evolve. So for brand evolution, I think the toy industry is just interesting. I wish I had better view examples. But so you see Barbie, you see Tonka, you see, look at Legos now. God. It's bigger.
It's a roving conference, and like there's robots, and like they do.
I just drove past the movie.
Oh yeah, the movie picture. Yeah. Now there's a movie about
Star Wars Legos. Yeah, Star Wars Legos.
So yeah, I wanted to. So I've been reading a book, or I just finished a book not too long ago called The Psychology of Influence, and it was really interesting. Right. It doesn't matter. Basically, the guy who kind of came up with the idea of studying strategy back in the day, he's at UCLA, and I'm blanking on the name. But he talks about like going to buy his kid a toy at Christmas, and the toy is not there when he goes to the store. So he buys, you got to buy a big ticket item toy for Christmas, so he buys something else for his kid. And then a month and a half later, they're, or in January, February, they're in the toy store, and his son goes, "Hey, remember you said you were going to get that for me?" And he's like, "All right, I promised, I told you I would do it." And then he talks about being on a plane and flying back from like New York, like a big cross-country flight. And who does he happen to be sitting next to? He happens to be sitting next to like a senior vice president from Mattel. And somehow they start, that onto this story. And the guy from Mattel starts laughing, and he's like, "What's so funny?" And he's like, "No, we do that on purpose." And he's like, "What do you mean we do that on purpose?" And he said, "No, our industry figured out that there was these huge spikes right around Christmas where everybody bought these like Elmo or, Tickle Me Elmo and all these like big ticket item toys. And so what we did is we created a fake scarcity. So we got plenty of Tickle Me Elmos, but we only put a certain number on the shelves during Christmas because we know that parents like you will promise their children this toy. And then when you can't get it in our really, like deep down months of January, February, March, when toy stores are way down, then we flush the shelves with these ideas, this kind of false scarcity. And to me, it's really interesting to think that
it's like the toy industry of Enron.
Yeah, well, it does seem extremely evil right up until that point that you go, that is utter brilliance, like how do you affect an industry and how do you do things? You kind of create these scarcity moments. And we talked about this, actually, when we were driving over here, we talked about Skylanders, another one of those like brilliant toys.
Yeah, I was going to say another way to articulate that would be to amp the perceived value of your product, of your brand, of your beer. Always in retail, this is the idea that it's not a this beer tastes good. We have to. There's a description, a flavor, a body behind the beer, a name that has to embody the
gravitas. So
yeah, it has to. Its name itself shares a kind of story, right? It has to pay off on the flavor of the beer. So we want it to. We want to imbue everything that we do with an increased sense of value. So you know, and that becomes your brand. That sense of value is that ephemeral, you know, brand that wraps everything in marketing and sales.
The sense that, you know, that shining beacon that draws them to you when you're standing, you know, when I'm in the craft beer aisle at Whole Foods and I'm looking at, you know, 1,000 different options. Thank God I live in Portland. But I have all of these different options and selections, and really what I'm trying to do if I'm the brewer is, you know, I want you to be I want you to have that love mark and I'm your go-to. But the reality of the matter is that I just hope that every fourth time you grab me off the shelf, because I know in a market where there's lots of options and you're a connoisseur of fine beer like myself, you're gonna reach and peck around. But when I go to grab my pack for Super Bowl, I'm going to grab, you know, 3 or 4 of these ones that I've never tried before, this new thing or this seasonal or whatever. But I'm always going to grab that, you know, that 1 in 4. I'm always going to grab that 4th, and it's always going to be, you know, an Ninkasi Total Domination, or it's going to be, you know, like whatever that go-to is for you. And I think that's really the big, thing in and around kind of creating that identity and that brand. It goes to your flavor, it goes to your culture, it goes to all kinds of different things. So that was kind of my point in the idea of that, you know, creating false scarcity. You release something and you tease people, you build that anticipation, and it's that brand. You know, I kind of want to go back to Hopworks and say, you know, you've got the Abominable, but you need the Sasquatch beer that only shows up like once every 3 years or something. You know, like what is that thing that you can do? Yeah, and then, you know, that beer is, you know, $12, you know, an ounce or whatever. You know, like you want to create that.
If you can spot it.
Yeah, if you can spot it, you can find it, you can drink it, but it's going to cost you, kind of thing. So, kind of like Piney. Yeah.
Or like beers from Belgium.
Yeah. We're monks. We drink all our beer all the time, but we need to build a roof on the church. So we're going to send some of this over to the U.S. And oh my God, what is that? Oh, I've got to go have that. I got to get it. Yeah.
That's some of those beers. Talk about ending on this. Talk about perceived value, right? We only create and sell the beer once every 10 years. These kind of things.
You know, there's also the. I remember when I moved to Berlin, I was told this was a sipping beer, and I didn't listen. So that's, you know, it's that totally out there, like it's so, you know, what we used to refer to as elephant beer, which actually most beers now would qualify as elephant beers from back in the day, you know, especially on the higher end. But it's that idea that this is, you know, like, why we're going to charge you, you know, $17 for this, you know, 22 is because you only need one of these, and you shouldn't have more than one of these because we're going to, you know, it's this extremely high content alcohol.
I did want to mention that I went to my friend Randy's Clues Brews here in North Portland, and so this is like delicious, locally brewed IPA. Do you guys agree it's really damn good?
Yeah,
it's good. It's good
nice beer.
So how much do you think this growler cost me? I mean,
$12.
You would think at least something like this, right? $5. How does he stay in business? My point is you guys should charge real money for your beer. I hope you guys, you know.
Well, I know.
I'm trying to give him more money.
Times.
I know, but he's not giving me a break. That's what he charges.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, he's just all about. He's all about. I want everybody to have as much beer as they can, you know, try.
When you amp the perceived value, you can charge more. that's the idea.
All right, guys, it is 7 o'clock. Wow, that went fast. Thanks for everything, Jeff, for
Hope you
talking
guys enjoyed it.
about it. And we'll be back here next week at 6 o'clock, but you won't see me. You will see Lisa Payton. She will dive in for 3 weeks to deal with digital and SEO and all kinds of fun things in and around the digital space. So put that on your calendar next week with Lisa, and then I will join you at the very end on week 8, and we'll talk story. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. I'm excited about that. That's what I've been waiting all semester for. So thanks again, and have a great evening. Take care, guys.
Ciao.